Okay, it just delayed that time. Hi, everybody. Here with Dr. Laura Sanger, who is totally one of my favorite people to have here. And thank you for coming again. I appreciate it. It's so funny. I'm like, I'd like to have you back. When can you come? Well, in 2030, I'm available. I'm available in March for about 5 minutes, but if you can make that 5 minutes, I might be able to squeeze you in the next week. No, I'm kidding. But it is, I'm so happy that you are that busy. And I literally think we scheduled this in December. So thank you very, very, very much for coming.
Oh, it's always my pleasure. You're one of my favorites, Carmen.
Okay, so I just had a couple of announcements. One, I did some dermal supplement that I was supposed to only do once a week, and I did it every day, and it was on my wrists, and I got the worst reaction, but not so bad that like I had to put something on it immediately. So I wanted to share with all of the people that have purchased skin food from Pharaoh. I put it on one of my wrists and I left the other one alone just to heal, naturally. And it healed so much faster. And I just love knowing that there was, I'm not paid by Pharaoh anymore. They sponsored me in the summer, but it's such a great product. And I just wanted to share that because I feel like there's not enough people collaborating and doing things just to do them for each other. And
Mhm.
so I really love his products. Go to pharaoh.com. They're all natural, made from pig lard, and they've got like 5 ingredients. And so I just wanted to share it was gone in 2 seconds, and the other one took about 3 days. The other thing I wanted to share is I had the most lovely couple here. If you haven't had a chance to see it, really should see it because it's such a basic thing, a pillow. You think, okay, who cares about pillows? I have to have it comfortable, that's it. But there's dust mites and there's heat regulation and there's all kinds of things that can go on, not to mention off-gassing from polyester and blah, blah, blah. And I had the most lovely couple here. They make all natural wool pillows, and I ordered one for my daughter for Christmas. She loved it, so I had them on, and they sent me two pillows. They sent me this. Now these are like the coolest thing because it's like all natural cotton that comes from Texas. And then they've got the wool batting inside. And I had to share again how excited I am about that. But then they also sent me a bonus little travel pillow that I'm going to take on my sister's yacht and see how it does in the humidity. But I just wanted to thank Wilshire and to also remind people that it's sometimes just the little things. Like we lay our head on this for 8 hours and we have no dust mites and we have no off gassing and it's just a lovely product. So I just wanted to thank them publicly for sending me that because they didn't have to do that. Okay, now we'll roll into Dr. Laura. So before we get started, I just recently watched your last video, which came out, I guess, about 4 months ago, and you were talking about the difference between sin and iniquity.
Mhm.
Before we get rolling, can you share that? Because I thought that was really, really powerful.
Absolutely. Yeah. So a lot of people aren't super familiar with what iniquity is. We hear it, but what does that mean? And I think there's a slight difference between sin and iniquity. So sin means missing the mark, but iniquity is a pattern of sin that comes from having a depraved mind. And so what I think about it, as in an analogy format is you think about yarn. So sin is like a single strand of yarn, but iniquity is strand upon strand woven together to form like this thick cord. And again, it comes out of this place of evil ambition. So your heart is set on evil ambition and you're stuck in that pattern of sin and you just keep doing it over and over and over again. So that's the difference between sin is missing the mark. We all fall short. Iniquity is having a pattern of sin operating in our lives.
Yes. And sometimes it is for pleasure, like you think it's pleasure,
Mhm.
addiction, alcohol, things like that. But it because there's those layers of family history or genetic propensities or even your own subconscious kind of hiding it, which may fall right into what we're going to talk about today. And
Mhm.
so when I asked Laura, tell everyone how we decide. I love our the way we roll on this. Tell everyone how we decide what we're going to be chatting about.
I love it too, because you're so open to it. So I don't know how many, maybe about a year and a half ago, I told the Lord, like, I love being on the receiving end when somebody is sharing and the Holy Spirit is speaking through them and they use like words or phrases or a concept that just really connects the dots for me or brings confirmation. I always enjoy being on the receiving end of that. And so about a year and a half ago, I just prayed and I was like, Lord, I want to be a conduit for that in other people's lives. And so the Lord said, then ask me for the scrolls for each audience. And so I spend time before speaking, whatever audience it is. It could be an audience of 5 people or a huge conference or, online like we're doing. And I just asked the Lord, what is it that you want to speak? And it doesn't mean that I always get it right. But so what I do is once I hear what the Lord is saying, I'll run it by you, Carmen, to see if it fits with the flow of what you've been talking about, or if you think your audience will be open to that. And then we go with it. And you are always like, yes, let's do it. So
Well, I mean,
I'm
honestly, it's
so
always
appreciative.
so good. It's always so good. And so this week we're gonna piggyback off of your concept of the Nephilim host, which if
Mhm.
you do not know what the Nephilim host is, if this is like your first time here, I suggest you go back and watch some of Dr. Laura's other shows first, because this kind of builds upon it. Now, it doesn't mean you won't understand what's going on if you want to stay in the live and blah, blah, blah. But a Nephilim host, I guess we could let's start there. Just give a cursory like summary of what a Nephilim host is.
Yeah, absolutely. So Nephilim host is a term that I coined in my book, The Roots of the Federal Reserve, and it represents a human who is partnered with the spiritual forces of darkness to carry out the Nephilim agenda. And the Nephilim agenda is the plan to defile the human genome through the propagation of a hybrid race. So those are kind of the basic definitions. And I'll build on it, like you said, because I imagined you might have listeners that haven't heard me on your show before. And so I'll provide some basic information, but yes, I agree with you. If you want to dive deeper, go back and listen to some of our other interviews.
Also, you can find Dr. Laura and all of her information and the things that she shared. She's broken down her book, she's broken down her spiritual mapping, and that's all on her YouTube channel, No Longer Enslaved. She has a website, No Longer Enslaved. And then I think, isn't that all of your social media also?
My social media is Laura Sanger 444 Hertz, and I'm on Telegram and Instagram.
Okay, good. We're going to tell everyone now, we'll tell everyone later. And so I would also add to what you just said, and I know that I asked you for a cursory one, but I think that there's both bound and will. And I think the will opens it, but I do think some people get bound in those Nephilim host positions. Do you agree with that?
I think the will is what opens the door to being bound.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. But I think there might be people who have opened the door and then it just takes them further and further and further into it.
right. And
Yeah.
so when you had your little prayer time with God, he was saying, let's talk about mind viruses, mind parasites when you're talking about the Nephilim host. So what is a Nephilim host mind virus?
Well, it's interesting, as I talked about coining this term Nephilim host in my book, I wasn't thinking at all about parasites, but one of the things that the Lord does with me is he'll just nudge me to do some research in a particular area. And so recently, he nudged me. It was actually someone who reached out on my website and sent me some information. And the Holy Spirit's like, yes, dig into that. Because I get a lot of people, that reach out, and I wish I had the time to research everything. But the Holy Spirit really highlighted this. And so I started diving in. And I have to say that the world of parasites is not for the faint of heart. It's a little bit like diving headfirst into a sewage drain. And it just is. I don't recommend doing this research if you're eating. I made that mistake. I had lunch one time while watching a video on parasites, and oh, that wasn't good. But you know, one of the things that I like to do is dig deep and uncover what's there. And I almost gave up on doing this research because I was sufficiently grossed out. But once I discovered that parasites can actually control our mind, I was like, game on.
Yes.
Like, these stinking bugs are not going to hide in the shadows. And so that's why I started to really engage and dig into it.
My daughter says that they're medically proven to be more active on full moons too, wild, right?
Oh, interesting.
I haven't
Interesting.
confirmed that, but she's usually pretty reliable.
That's good. Yeah, I'll have to add that to my research list for sure. What's crazy is that, 60 million Americans are infected with parasites, and they cause, a wide range of diseases. So I thought where I'd start maybe is just to define a parasite, because there's both biological parasites and also social or societal parasites. So a biological parasite is essentially a living organism that feeds off of another larger living organism called a host. And the reason it feeds off of the host is to obtain nutrients so that it can grow and multiply. And most often it does that in a way that's harmful to the host. So that's a biological parasite. And then a societal parasite is someone who lives off of or is dependent upon, or someone who exploits another person without giving anything in return. And you know me, I love to dig into the etymology of words. So then I started digging into, okay, what is parasite in the ancient Greek? What does it mean? And it's the word parasitosis, and it means a person who eats at another's table. And then when I began looking at it in the Hebrew, this is where it became even more interesting, and some of the dots started to connect for me. So one of the Hebrew words for worm is tolah, and it means scarlet, worm, crimson, or maggot. Now, immediately I was interested by that, because I felt like, is this another instance of red being a calling card for the Nephilim agenda? And on one of our previous interviews, I think it was called Fallen Sons of God or something along those lines, I talk about the two symbols that I traced all throughout history, looking at the Nephilim and how I could trace them from the days of Noah to the US dollar. And one of those symbols is the color red. And I talked about how that began with Esau. When Esau transformed into Edom, that's where that color red became really important. So Edom in the Hebrew is Adam, and it means to be red. And so in a nutshell, what Esau did is he chose to be red by filling his hands with murderous blood, because he killed Nimrod on the fields. And he should have been the one in the tent making the red lentil stew, because that's a traditional meal of comfort for a grieving person. And so he was supposed to be caring for his father Isaac, who was grieving the loss of Abraham, but instead he was off in the fields killing Nimrod. Right. And so that was the beginning of the color red being linked to the Nephilim agenda. And I traced that in my book all throughout history. So when I discovered, wait a second, the Hebrew word for worm involves the color red, scarlet, and crimson, I immediately was like, okay, Holy Spirit, I think I know why you wanted me to research this. And then when I looked at the root word, the Hebrew root word for the worm, it's yalah, and it means to speak rashly, talk wildly, to blurt out inconsiderably, and to devour. Now, that doesn't, to me, describe a worm at all, but it does describe Nephilim hosts. And so again, I was realizing that a lot of the characteristics of Nephilim hosts are actually parasitic behaviors. And, one of the things that you and I have talked about before in some of our other interviews is, in chapter 13 of my book, I identify 4 physical traits and 19 behavioral characteristics of the Nephilim and their giant offspring. And one of the reasons I did that is because it's important that we understand that there are Nephilim alive today. They weren't just, Nephilim from the days of antiquity. And so I identify these behavioral characteristics. Well, as I began looking at them through this lens of parasitic behavior, I realized that 12 of the 19 are associated with this parasitic behavior. So I'm going to read those, and then hopefully we can see how all the dots begin to connect.
I love when you nerd out. It is so fun to listen. Go, girl, go.
Okay, so these are the behavioral characteristics that I came up with, at least 12 of them. Lustfulness in conjunction with sexual misconduct, a pervasive pattern of instability in relationships marked by control, manipulation, intimidation, and domination over others, haughty and prideful as if above reproach, vengeful or inappropriate intense anger, reoccurring violent acts displaying disregard for the rights of others, lack of remorse for heinous acts against other living beings, dishonesty in trade and business transactions, a propensity toward corruption, sexual perversion involving pedophilia, sexual domination of others against their will, and or bestiality, trafficker of humans, engage in cannibalism, commit human sacrifices, and then the enslavement of others. And so as I read those, you can see that, these behavioral characteristics are consistent with a societal parasite. So someone who exploits others for their own personal gain. Now, of course, when you think about the Federal Reserve, it's parasitic in nature as well, because it feeds off of the debt of we the people. But if we go down this rabbit hole a little bit deeper, what we find is at the core of this Nephilim agenda is the goal to strip us of our humanity. They want to defile our human genome. So what they're busy trying to do is hijack our bodies and turn us into hybrids. And one of the ways they have to do that is first hijack our minds. Now, it turns out that these biological parasites are capable of controlling our mind. And I think this is one of the means by which the Nephilim agenda is advancing today.
Yeah, and that's another thing my daughter was talking about, was that, are you hungry or are your parasites hungry?
Mm-hmm.
Are you thirsty or are your parasites thirsty for that alcohol? And it really is like, whoa. Also, I just started studying the heavens declare, which is a totally different thing, but I will tell you, I got to Scorpio, and each zodiac sign, the Mazzaroth from Job, has 3 deacons, and one of the deacons for Scorpio is Arcturus, and it's the red star, and it is in the serpent's head. When they draw out the man stepping on the Scorpio or the snake, and the snake trying to what is it? The woman's seed is being bruised on the heel, but in the end, I mean, the whole story is that Christ, crushes the scorpion. But it is interesting that it is a red star, and it's the brightest one. It's just fascinating to me, the amount of red that's involved. And have you seen all of the pop stuff, like like Beyonce and all of these people coming out, Sam Smith, with this crazy red?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it definitely is sending comms, and they're linking themselves to that Nephilim agenda. And, you look throughout scripture, and of course, there's positive connotations to the color red in the Bible, the blood of Jesus being the primary. But more so, you look at the color red in the Bible, and it's associated with Satan. Yeah. And so it just is, it's very interesting how people are aligning themselves. And not to mean that, I don't want people to think that if you wear the color red, you're aligning yourself with Satan. Not at all. People choose to wear the color red for various reasons. But like you're saying, these pop stars, a lot of that is comms, and they're aligning themselves, and they're communicating through what they wear.
Yes.
Most certainly. Yeah. So these parasites, they can hijack our mind. And once I discovered that, I was like, okay, this is important, because this is yet another way that Nephilim hosts are trying to control our behavior. And, there's this emerging field called neuroparasitology, and it examines the impact that parasites have on the central nervous system. And so, we now know that parasites can alter the behavior of their host to the point of hijacking the host decision-making process. So parasites are masters at chemical and biological warfare. In fact, they specialize in mind control and what's called molecular mimicry. Now, parasites, they influence a host on multiple levels. So they can influence us on the level of our DNA, but all the way up to our social interactions. And what they do is they disrupt our perception of reality, and that's how they begin to control our behavior. Now, I want to give some examples of this. So this is where the rubber meets the road with a parasite called Toxoplasma gondii, and I'll just call it T. gondii for short.
Okay, thank you.
It's a parasite that's actually found in cat feces and
yes,
undercooked meat. Yeah. And so what's crazy to think is that there's actually 30% of the world's population is infected with T. gondii, and 22% of the US population is. Now, it can lay dormant in our bodies for years, but this parasite, it prefers to invade our lymph nodes, our brain, heart, and lungs. And so what it does is it actually manipulates the behavior of the host by using epigenetic processes to alter the genes within the amygdala. So here we have, stimuli that would normally activate feared responses actually activate sexual arousal instead. And so this is what can lead to fatal attraction phenomenon. Crazy to put those two together. And so what happens then is the host actually becomes less risk aversive. And I'll give you a couple
that
of
explains stalkers too.
Yes. So a couple of examples, with rats that are infected with T. gondii, they're actually aroused sexually by the smell of cat urine. And so they'll be drawn towards the cat, which turns out to be fatal for them. Now with humans, again, risky behavior that would normally trigger a feared response is actually perceived as benign situations. And so, they will actually engage in more deviant sexual acts than people that are not infected. So a couple of examples here is women. So research has found that women who are infected with T. gondii have an increased attraction to bestiality versus women who are not infected. Again, that is a character trait of the Nephilim host.
That isn't of Satan. I don't know what is.
Exactly.
And did you see they just made it legal in Spain?
No, I didn't.
They just made it legal. Bestiality is legal as long as you don't hurt the animal.
Oh my gosh.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And
Yeah.
so, we need to. I'm ready to get to the last question, which is how do we get rid of these parasites? But I'll be patient.
We'll get there. So another example in men that are infected with T. gondii, they actually have an increased attraction to sexual practices that include bondage, rape, and violence.
Oh my God.
So again, these are behavioral traits of a Nephilim host. Now, even more interesting to me is this T. gondii, people who are infected, it's actually associated with neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and also mental illnesses like schizophrenia and depression. So in my earlier years in my career, I specialized in schizophrenia. I did my dissertation in that area. I worked for years with people with schizophrenia. And what research is finding with these parasites is that people infected with T. gondii are 270% more likely to develop schizophrenia.
Wow. Oh
Isn't
my
that
gosh.
crazy?
I have to tell Jerry Marzinski this. So have you seen any of his work?
I saw his interview with you.
Isn't it amazing?
It is amazing. I am so grateful for his work. So grateful.
You two need to collaborate. That's incredible.
Yeah. And then what they've also found is of current cases of schizophrenia, 1/5 of those are attributable to parasites. So if I were still practicing, I retired from clinical work about 10 years ago, but if I was still practicing, I would have my clients, as part of the treatment plan, do a parasite cleanse, under the observation of either a naturopath or a functional integrative medicine doctor. Because if the parasites are driving the mental illness, let's get rid of those and see what's left. And then we can treat what's left. But to me, that was astounding to recognize.
Oh my gosh, it's huge.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that that parasite not only gets into that child, that human, but how it disrupts their whole family's lives.
Definitely. Yeah.
It's
And so
so
going
sad.
one step even beyond that, there's been some fascinating research by a professor at UC Santa Barbara. His name is Kevin Lafferty, and he actually looked at the impact of T. Gandhi on, a population and how that impacts the culture. And so what he found is that populations with a higher prevalence rate of T. Gandhi actually exhibit more neuroticism. And so what neuroticism is it's a personality trait disposition that, a person experiences negative affects such as anger, anxiety, irritability, self-consciousness, these overall emotional instability, a
Controlling
state of.
others, grooming others.
Definitely, yes. And so what he found too is that in these populations that have higher prevalence rates, they tend to establish authoritarian governments. And
Wow.
so it is mind-blowing to me that these little microscopic parasites within us, if when multiplied, because you can pass them in utero, so when multiplied in a population, it can literally affect the type of government that population allows. It's astounding to me.
Well, we
And
must be
even,
infested with them. We got little hydras running around everybody's blood right now.
yeah, I know. So another thing that I discovered in my research is that parasites may also be associated with homosexuality.
Wow.
So in the 1980s, there were two different research studies separated by 3 years, different research teams, and they found almost the exact same finding. And that was that there was a 400% increase in the prevalence rate of intestinal parasites within homosexual men as compared to heterosexual men. So a 400% increase in parasites.
Wow.
Now, I've also read anecdotal reports of homosexual men, when they do a parasite cleanse, they actually stop craving anal sex. And so to me, this screams that we need further research in this area because
But
we
such a
need to,
signature move of Satan, too. Anything to do with feces or butts or whatever. Because as you see how people get more and more deprived, like even the recent Johnny Depp Amber Heard thing where she pooped on his bed. Like, who does that? You
mm.
know, that's not normal behavior.
Yeah, when I said that, doing this kind of research is not for the faint of heart, I could not believe the stuff I was reading that people do. I'm like, oh my goodness, I just touched into the cesspool of humanity, really.
When I had George Tonks on the show and he was, raped as a child, that was one of the things that the homosexual men did with the little boys. It had to do with poop. It was very bizarre.
Yeah,
And so that is a signature move of Satan.
absolutely. And I think it's tied into these parasites. So, again, I think we need further research in this area because it's important to understand what extent parasites are actually driving homosexual behavior. But of course, that type of research probably wouldn't get funding. Even if it did, it would be censored because I think it would totally abolish the LGBTQ agenda.
Right.
But it's so important for us. And it makes sense because the most recent research that I could find on this topic was 35 years ago. So that tells you
The
that.
last time someone felt safe doing it. And
Exactly.
I've had Judith Rose on the show, and she and her husband, who's a trans man, and he's a huge advocate for, this is a mess. We don't want this to go any further than it has. We've talked about how, who knows what vaccines did, who knows, there's so many implications that we could be judging somebody for being gay when we have no idea what they're
Mhm.
bound by. And it might not have
Exactly.
been their choice, as you're saying, it could come through utero
Mhm.
to, the parasites. It's the same as the schizophrenia. This is fascinating.
Yeah. Okay, ready for one more piece of
Yeah,
research?
I'm ready.
Well, actually, I have more, but one more in this area.
I'm
So,
more in this topic. Yeah.
right. In 2015, they actually found a link between parasites and cannibalism. So researchers, they found that freshwater shrimp that had a common parasite named Pleistophorum muleri, they actually had an increased rate of cannibalism versus non-infected shrimp. So, these shrimp that were infected with this parasite, it caused them to be efficient foragers of young shrimp. Now, my mind, this naturally inquisitive mind that I have, I start to wonder, is this what's happening with human behavior? This push to normalizing cannibalism, is
Oh,
this driven by parasites within people? And I think, again, drawing it back to the Nephilim host, that's a behavioral characteristic of a Nephilim host is cannibalism. And so you begin to see, is there has there been this agenda to weaponize parasites?
yeah, that was my next question.
Yeah,
I mean, I understand there's principalities and I understand that they have power and that they literally have influence, but could man use it to weaponize against people?
absolutely. Yes. And I think what we're finding is that's exactly what has happened. And so I have a good friend. I don't remember if I've talked to you about him on our show or on your show, but his name is Mitchell Florin, and he is a he's a biopharmaceutical microbiologist, and he was a whistleblower on Big Pharma. And I am so appreciative and grateful for Mitchell's friendship because I'm a learner. I love to learn. And he's like my own personal professor. Whenever I need research on a topic,
You did tell me about him. I
I
love
just,
him. I love
yeah,
him. Just hearing about him.
yeah. So he's been so wonderful to me and just walking me through all of these concepts and sending me, tons of research. But then if I have questions, explaining it to me. So what I want to do is just lay out a little bit of what Mitchell has taught me,
Okay.
because hopefully this will connect the dots for us and how we then can be set free from parasites. So what he um, what he highlights, first of all, is that all pathogens are parasitic in nature, but not all parasites are pathogens. So that's important to keep in mind. And parasites, as I talked about earlier, they need a living host to survive. And so technically speaking, viruses are parasitic in nature. So what Mitchell says, he says viruses are small, obligate intracellular parasites, which by definition contain either RNA or DNA genome surrounded by a protective virus-coated protein coat. So when we understand that parasites can be bacteria and viruses, then we can see how they have been weaponized against us. So an example of that is Lyme disease. Lyme disease is a bioweapon, and Mitchell describes Lyme disease as an obligately parasitic, tick-transmitted, invasive, persistent bacterial pathogen that causes disease in humans and non-reservoir vertebrates, primarily through the induction of inflammation. So what happened in the 1950s is that ticks were weaponized with the help of Nazi scientists from Project Paperclip or Operation Paperclip. And
People.
this was in conjunction with Fort Detrick. They had an offshore germ warfare animal disease lab on Plum Island. And so they were busy weaponizing these ticks. Well, then in 1975, you get this strange outbreak of a disease in Old Lyme, Connecticut, and that's where Lyme disease gets its name. And it's because these ticks were weaponized with a bacteria called Borrelia burgdorferi, and it was carried by these ticks, and that's what causes Lyme disease in humans, and it attacks the central nervous system, causing these debilitating symptoms. So
Yes.
that's one example of how parasites have been weaponized. Another example is more recent, and I'll use some code language. But with the recent injection, that it was used to combat the virus of 2020, parasites have been found in that injection. So Dr. Robert Young found trypanosoma parasite in the pharmaceutical company that rhymes with Heiser.
Is that the one that looks like a hydra? Is that what he
Yes.
saw? Okay, yeah, that's
And
why.
so this parasite can actually, it's lethal because it causes inflammation in both the heart muscle and also the neural membranes. And strains of this parasite in Africa actually cause a fatal disease called sleeping sickness. And then North American strains of trypanosoma can cause Chagas disease, which is also a fatal disease. Now, interestingly, trypanosoma, there's a high prevalence of trypanosoma found in AIDS patients as well. And so the question is, what the heck is this company doing putting this in their product? And it makes me think, is this why we're having this died suddenly phenomenon,
Yes, yes, yes.
And then one more thing, and then I know some of this is dark, and so I'll pull back up to bring some encouragement. But, one of the things in more recently, December of 2021, scientists actually unveiled this advancement in biotechnology, and it's the first self-replicating robot called a xenobot. And these robots actually originate from stem cells found in a frog leg. And what they're able to do is collect other cells nearby them and self-replicate.
Yes.
And so what Mitchell is pointing out, or what he pointed out to me, is that these xenobots can be made into parasites, into viruses, into bacteria, because they're non-differentiated. So that means that scientists can create a synthetic organism that self-replicates indefinitely. Now, what could possibly go wrong with an invention like that,
I
right?
mean, it's so funny to me how these scientists and engineers, I mean, unless they're just complete Nephilim hosts, how they don't question it, Like
Mhm.
there's so many things that somebody would say, "Hey, can you make this?" And I'd be like, "No, I'm not
Right.
gonna make that. Yes, I can, but I'm not going to." It just blows my mind how willing
Mhm.
scientists are to do this stuff, to break things down. Well, what do you think you're doing that for? And every single time AI has been let loose, it goes rogue bad. Never rogue good,
Right.
rogue bad. And
You
it's
know,
because of who programs it. Man,
exactly.
God. Only God can program intelligence.
Exactly. Yeah. And what's interesting is there was kind of this dystopian confession by the founder of nanotechnology. His name is Eric Drexler. And he kind of explained to us what could go wrong with this type of invention. So he wrote a book called Engines of Creation. And he speaks about the potential of this gray goo. And so what in the book, he envisions this time where nanobots would replicate incessantly and essentially like devour everything in their sight and leave this gray goo behind them, which is essentially like this sludge made of themselves. And so, that was more than 10 years ago. He's writing this book saying this is what could happen. Well, scientists are on the verge of this precipice. And again, you wonder what is going on? What are they thinking? And
Yeah.
with
It was
the
in the movie
connection to,
Lucy. It was in the one with Scarlett Johansson. Did you see that?
mm-mm,
Okay. Well, you should see it. It basically is that. Like it just takes over
yeah.
who she is and she becomes, supposedly one with God or whatever. But I do believe they're trying to sell people on the concept of, give up your body, commit your mind to the cloud with all of us. We'll be this, because we can be God together.
Yeah,
Good
yeah.
things, I'll pass.
And we know that they do the predictive programming, so they have to tell us what they're doing and get us used to it. So
Yeah.
absolutely.
And
Yeah,
I know graphene oxide's a huge piece to that
most
because it's
definitely.
the most miraculous one molecule deep.
Mhm.
Just they can do it's so they can work so well with it. And one of the top manufacturers of it ended up being a whistleblower. I don't know what happened to him. I know he was hiding
Mhm.
because he was,
Mhm.
they were going after him. So it
Mhm.
is a crazy, crazy world. And so is there any other ways that they're weaponizing it that you know of?
Well, yes. I think with pharmaceuticals that are coming out, we just need to be very careful with any pharmaceuticals, especially mRNA products. We have
Mhm.
to realize what it's doing to us and that they easily can slip in because they already have. They can easily slip in these parasites. So not only are you getting the graphene oxide, but you're also getting parasites, and that's a double whammy. And I think, to kind of pull it back up and bring some hope, one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that whatever Nephilim hosts throw at us, Jesus already has a solution. He's our living hope. So we're never without hope. And, I know that the Lord has called me to walk in Ephesians 5:11, which says, have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. And so when I come on shows like this, I want to help people understand what it is we're facing, the spiritual battle, to equip us, not to stir up fear, but to equip us, because Hosea 4:6 says, my people are destroyed from a lack of knowledge.
Yes.
But once we have this knowledge, then we have to remember to stand in 2 Timothy 1:7, which says, for God did not give us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. So the good news is that we can be set free from parasites.
Yay. So let's share that. How can we be set free?
Yeah.
The final question.
The final question. So this is the good news, right? But it does take warfare. It does take investment on our part. But the good news is we can be set free from these parasites. So, when we think about our bodies, we're triune beings, right? We're made up of body, soul, and spirit. And so we have to realize that the enemy tries to attack us on all three levels. But Romans 8:31 says, what then shall we say in response to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? So the good news is God is for us, and he's already provided the path for us for freedom. Now, one of the ways to free our bodies from a parasite is doing a parasite cleanse. And for those of us that have traveled outside of the United States, we may have gone to Mexico or the Caribbean or Asia, Africa, South America, we may have picked up a parasite in traveling and eating different foods. Also, those that are cat owners,
I
most
was just going
likely,
to ask about that too.
yeah,
Good.
most likely you have a parasite or two. And so, we want to think about doing a parasite cleanse. Now, there's all sorts of options for parasite cleanses, but what I want to present to you is what Mitchell Florin has put together, my friend, and it's one that I've been doing. And so prior to at least explaining this parasite cleanse, I just want to give a little bit more information about Mitchell, just kind of his background, a little bit more about his expertise, so people can feel confident
Right.
if they
And
want to
then
do this
also
parasite cleanse.
just to make everyone at YouTube happy, we literally are not doctors, we're just sharing what we're doing or what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mitchell, as I mentioned, he was a biopharmaceutical microbiologist, and he was in senior management over quality assurance and quality control. So what that means essentially is he was overseeing the testing process for products. So he would see whether or not they were ready for market. Now, one of the products put out by Theravance, he failed. He failed to pass that product. And it was because it was producing serious adverse events, which are otherwise known as SAEs. Well, Theravance wasn't reporting the SAEs to the FDA. And so Mitchell stepped out as a whistleblower and let the FDA know what was happening. Well, as you can imagine, Theraphants became very upset and threatened him, and he actually was wrongfully terminated. And so he lost his marriage.
Oh my
His
God.
health fell apart. He was blackballed from his career, and he lost his financial portfolio. So he paid a huge price to do the right thing, and that was to not pass this drug that was creating serious adverse events. So Mitchell is a man of high integrity. He is definitely, I think I may have mentioned this before, but he is the most brilliant person I have ever encountered. And I'm so grateful to him because, like I said, he just wants people to understand. He wants to get the information out there so people know how to combat these things. He also is consulting with the FLCCC Alliance. So that's the Frontline Critical Care COVID, or Frontline COVID Critical Care Alliance is what it stands for. So he's consulting with some of the doctors in that group because they're developing a protocol to treat long haul COVID.
Yay.
Yeah, so I'm very excited about that. So here's some of the things that he says about doing a parasite cleanse. First of all, he wants to encourage everyone to seek out doing one under the guidance of either a naturopath or a functional integrative medicine doctor. And he says to remember that with a parasite cleanse, less is better. So you want to do it with a lower concentration over a longer period of time. So several months, because if you detox too fast,
You get sick.
you get very sick. Yes. And so it can actually cause you to reabsorb the dangerous chemicals that your body is trying to exit or expel. And that detox then could trigger an imbalance in your brain. So you could have fatigue, anxiety, depression, in severe cases, he says suicidal ideation. And so that's why it's really important to go slow. And then if anyone has comorbidities or are on pharmaceuticals, you want to make sure, again, to do it under the supervision of a functional integrative medicine doctor.
Yes.
And then also just to keep in mind that simple carbs and foods high in sugar actually fuel parasites. It's like their food. So we need to cut back on those types of foods as much as possible. So for those who are not on pharmaceuticals and don't have comorbidities, you can do what's called a light detox. And this is what he's put together. This is what I've been doing. And what you do with this light detox is you do it for a month, and then you take about 10 days off, and then you do it for 2 months. And at the end of those 2 months, get a blood workup just to see how you're doing, to see if you've processed those things out. So I've done the 1 month. I'm in the midst of my break, and then I'll go back to doing the 2 months. Now, the reason my break is a little bit longer because, as I mentioned to you off camera, that I just recently had surgery. That's why I'm wearing this hat, because it's covering up a big bandage on my head. And I have to take antibiotics in the healing process of that surgery. So I reached out to Mitchell, and he said, don't do the parasite cleanse while you're on antibiotics. And he walked me through what I needed to do. So I'm taking a little bit longer of a pause, but I'm only on antibiotics for 7 days. And then I'm going to hit hard with the probiotics and then do the parasite cleanse again. So with a parasite cleanse, what you do is you make yourself a drink. And I call it the worst part of my day because this drink makes your face contort. So I'll let everyone know that. So it's made up of 1 tablespoon of lemon, 1 tablespoon of 100% Californian olive oil, 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, and 1 tablespoon of fulvic humic acid. Now, I should say, I'm going to go through this.
See, I like
detox.
that. I'm so bizarre. That's what I put on my carrot salad.
Yeah, it actually tastes like salad dressing to be honest.
Yes.
And so you're just chugging salad dressing.
Yes.
It does make your face
And I
contort a
actually
little.
enjoy that. I mean, that's how weird I am. Yes.
I also, for people who are trying to write all this down, I have it on my website. It's in my article from January called Parasite Free in 23. You just go to my website, go to that article, and this whole detox is written out for everyone.
Parasite free in 23.
Yeah,
Like
don't
it's
you
just,
like that?
yeah.
I got that idea from someone that follows me on Instagram. So I'm like, I'm using that.
Yeah, that's good. It's like Laura gets the scroll and then we roll.
I love it. I love it.
All right,
Okay,
so the
so
last one, how much of the Fuvic and what was it?
it's 1 tablespoon of fulvic humic acid.
Okay, Fulvic.
And I think it's called Vital Earth Minerals is the brand that I use. Mitchell and I don't get any cutbacks from
Yeah.
any of these products. We're not being paid at all from this. So you drink that first thing in the morning, at least 15 minutes before eating. And then
How
you want
much
to
of
make,
the olive oil? I got the 100%. Was that a tablespoon also?
yes,
So
yeah,
everything's a tablespoon. Doom, doom, doom.
everything is a tablespoon
Okay.
in this drink. Then you want to make yourself a detox tea, and you do this daily. You make the tea daily. And I drink mine in the morning, but you can drink it whenever you want. And how you do that is you boil water with 2 to 5 cloves in the water, fresh turmeric
Cloves of
root,
what?
like
Oh,
like the actual cloves you would buy like in the spice aisle. I buy them in bulk, and I just toss in I use about 4 to 5 because I
you
like the
chop them up at all or just
nope,
throw
you
them in the
just
hole?
toss them in. You have
Okay.
to be you have to be careful. I have a certain tea mug, and sometimes the cloves like slip through into my mouth. I'm like, oh wait, I got to put it back in. But I guess you could chop it up. They're hard though, so it's just easier to toss it in.
Yeah.
And then also you want to put in fresh turmeric root. So I buy the turmeric root at the grocery store, and I just, you peel it like you would a carrot and you chop it up. I put maybe, I don't know, 2 teaspoons or so. I just eyeball it. And then you also want to put in about the same amount of fresh ginger root. So again, you buy the ginger root, you peel it like you would a carrot, chop it up, stick it in the boiling water. And then 1 teaspoon of Manuka honey. And that's really important as well. So you
Get all those
drink that,
good minerals.
right? You drink that tea. And again, you discard what's ever left over. You don't want to keep it for the next day because it will oxidize. So just make it fresh every day. And then you also want to take sweet wormwood extract, and you take the recommended dose for that. And then also Japanese knotweed extract. Take the recommended dose.
Japanese knotwood, like
Not
KNO.
not weed,
Oh, not weed. Okay.
not weed. So Japanese knotweed extract. And you take the recommended dose with that. And then probiotics. Now he recommends Garden of Life Ultimate Care. And that's what I bought because Mitchell recommended it. I'm going to follow his recommendation. Again, we don't get any money from any of this.
Yeah. I will warn you, I pretty much think Garden of Life was bought out by Nestle. I'm not
Oh,
sure, but check into it. It used to be magnificent,
oh
but I
no.
think they were bought out by a Nestle. Double check that.
Okay, thank you. I will.
Yeah, you're
I
welcome.
will.
Also, would love to share with people. I'm obsessed. Well, you can't really tell. This is mineral water and it's got a little bit of a yellow color to it. I started juicing ginger, putting
Mm.
it into ice trays, and then putting the ice into my mineral water and making my own like truly fresh ginger. And I've also been throwing it into my tea and all kinds of stuff. It's already done. And so I just thought people might like that as well. I got that tip from my lash lady.
Ooh, I like it. I like it. So with this light detox, if anyone develops, significant nausea or you have consistent loose stools, you want to stop the parasite cleanse and then make sure you consult with a functional integrative medicine doctor. And again, you do it for 1 month, take about 10 days off, and then do it for another 2 months and get a blood workup. done. Now, for those that do have comorbidities and are on pharmaceuticals, you can still do a parasite cleanse, but you would need to definitely do it under the supervision of a doctor, functional medicine doctor, or naturopath. You want to make sure you get a blood work before and urine sample before doing it. And then, they can, based on that, choose the type of parasite cleanse that would be most beneficial. And then also, Mitchell, it's something that we all need to keep in mind is live a healthy lifestyle. Make sure you have cardio as part of your daily activity. Make sure you're eating a clean diet, because those things will also help you combat these parasites. So that's how we can, from the level of our body, be set free from parasites, but we also want to combat it from our soul and our spirit realm. And that is, the word of God provides us with tools there. And, I always go back to Romans 12:2, which says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. And so I think about, that word renew in the Greek. When I looked it up a little while ago, it just stuck with me because it's the Greek word anakinosis, and it means not only renewal, it means renovation. It means a complete change for the better. So think about, that's what the word of God is encouraging us to do with our mind. And when we understand that our mind, our brain has the capacity for neuroplasticity, which means it's malleable and adaptable, we can train our mind if we think on things above. And then it also, that word renew comes from the Greek root word anakeno, which means to cause to grow up, to make new, and to be changed into a new kind of life as opposed to the former corrupt self. And so this is what we need to do, is just remember that, Jesus is our way maker. He will always provide a pathway for us. And he has a pathway laid out that we can be set free from parasites. And, we ask the Lord to renew our mind day by day. One of the things I know I've shared with you before, but I put on my spiritual armor every day. Some people are like, why do you have to do that? Do you take it off every day? But for me, it's a reminder that I am engaging.
I like that person that asked you that. That's pretty smart, Alec.
That was my youngest son, actually.
Take off my armor. Actually, no, that's what I really wanted on.
Right. That was my youngest son that asked that question. He's like, why do we have to pray it on every day? But for me, it's like, it's a reminder that I am engaging in spiritual warfare every day, and I need that armor. And so when I do that, I also pray and I bind my mind to the mind of Christ, because I want my thoughts to align with his thoughts. And the good news is that, the name of Jesus is more powerful than any parasite that would try and control us. And we know that his blood speaks a better word. And I'm always encouraged, Romans 8 tells us that we are more than conquerors. And if God is for us, who can be against us? And so let's be proactive in going after these parasites. We don't want these organisms to take over our mind and our will and our bodies. We want to combat them so that we can walk in the fullness of what God has for us.
Yes, and yes. And this goes back to, how like God just works so cool, because learning all of this, I'm also, like I said, studying the heavens declare. And it's so crazy because the Mazzaroth, which is the zodiac, literally zodiac breaks down to what it means in the Hebrew and the Greek is the way or a way. And what's so wild is Satan took it and turned it into astrology, divination, when really the heavens declare the story of Christ. And it's so fascinating to me how much information there is out there that has been cloaked and hidden from us, and how important each one of our interests are. How important it is that you and Mitchell are working together, and that you're sharing this information and literally freeing people from parasites. But we can look up into the stars and know it is done. Like literally It is done. And it's
I
so
love
fun.
it.
I highly recommend people read The Heavens Declare because it just makes you realize that forever and ever Christ has been the savior. It's
Mhm.
literally written in the stars, and it is so fun to learn. I'm actually going to share it on Chantal's show in a couple of
Mm,
weeks.
mm.
Hopefully, I'll have it finished by then. I don't have the book finished yet, but it's excellent. And I just love that some Christian man studied like you did and got information out there for us. Thank you so much for the parasite idea. Tell everybody your website again and where they would need to click to find all the information you've already kind of outlined.
So my website is nolongerenslaved.com. And then if you go to the tab that says articles, it is the January article. I think it got published actually February 1st, but it says Parasite Free in 23. So you just open that. And at the end of that article is this light detox. And then, oh, I also have to let you know that my book is like within 2 weeks, probably is going to be an audiobook form. My
Yes,
publisher and
finally for me.
I know, I was thinking of you. I had to tell
I
you.
have your book just sitting here. It's so embarrassing.
So yeah, it'll be ready. It'll be on Audible and iTunes. We've worked really hard. I narrated it, which it was crazy hard. I had no idea how hard it is to narrate a book. And I
Yes.
didn't do myself any favors. I never thought I'd be reading my book out loud, but there's a lot of Greek and Hebrew terms that I had to figure out, how do I even say these? But anyways, that will be ready in a matter of weeks. And then certainly the book form is available on Amazon. And then I'm also excited to say that my book will be translated into Spanish as well. And so we're hoping to reach the Spanish
Bravo.
community.
Yeah, they need it since they're letting bestiality happen now legally.
Oh,
They need your
yeah.
book more than ever, girl.
Right, right. So I'm excited about those projects for sure. And then, like you said, I have a YouTube and Rumble channel, No Longer Enslaved. If people want to understand more about the Nephilim agenda, I have a 10-part series there. If they want to understand more about spiritual mapping, I have a 7-part series on that. And then, you can connect with me via LinkedIn or Instagram and Telegram under Laura Sanger 444 Hertz. So that's the ways to connect.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So if you had to, I've been asking everyone this question lately because I'm fascinated by it. When you're misunderstood or when people brush up against you in kind of a not good way, how are you misunderstood?
The spiritual mapping is New Age, that
Okay,
I'm involved in the New Age, because I talk about frequencies as well.
right.
And just like what you were saying about the Nazareth, that, the enemy loves to twist everything and pervert it. And so he's a counterfeiter. So frequencies in and of themselves, understanding how frequencies can be used,
Right.
are from the Lord, but the New Age has co-opted it. And so anytime somebody talks about frequencies, I have people like, not wanting to follow me or saying I'm New Age, and that's okay. I just encourage folks to look at the fruit of my life. And I've got plenty of podcasts now and articles that I've written, and people can, dive in and do their own research into who I am, what I represent, my relationship with the Lord. And one of the things that I love, I adore my publisher. She is so amazing. Her name is Monica, and she's with Relentlessly Creative Books. And a couple of years back, she and I were talking about the armor of God. And she said, the Lord has showed her that we can fashion our armor to fit who each of us are. And so I was like, that is awesome. So I began asking the Lord to show me the different pieces of my armor. And one of the things that he taught me about my shield of faith is my redemptive gift. So from Romans 12 is mercy and teacher. And so my shield of faith has mercy infused in it. So anyone that, attacks through false accusation, I just hold up that shield of faith and just release them and forgive them and allow love to go back to them. And I actually see like the Lion of the tribe of Judah, anytime like a dart hits that shield of faith, it releases this roar. And so I'm totally okay if people think I'm new age, because I know that I'm not. And I just hold up that shield of faith. So
And information is information. Satan can steal any information and use it. He stole the rainbow, and I'm mad about that. I still put the rainbow up. I'm sorry. I love the rainbow.
right.
The
Yeah.
LGBTQ can't have it. It's not there.
Right. It's God's first.
That's right. And so, one more question before I let you go. Thank you so much, by the way, for coming and sharing all of this incredible information. Um, what's the greatest compliment you've ever been given as far as it really hit you to your core of like, wow, that person sees me?
Um, I would say, like, when I read people's feedback that they give me or they reach out on my website, the greatest compliment is that they want to know Jesus more
Oh,
after listening to me.
I
And
love
so that just, I mean, it's everything to me. And I tell the Lord that when I come on shows like this, I was on Sam Tripoli,
Oh,
the
wow.
Tinfoil Hat podcast,
Yeah,
and I had a great time with Sam. And I know his audience probably doesn't know the Lord. Some of them certainly do, but probably a large portion don't. And I was like, Lord, are you sure you want me to go on this podcast? Because I ask him before each and every podcast, no matter the size of the audience, that doesn't matter to me. It's
right.
whether the Lord says yes. And then I say yes. Well, the Lord had said yes to go on Sam Tripoli. And so um, I was struggling a little bit because Sam and his co-host, they love to use the F word, and I'm
Yeah,
not fond of that.
yeah. I have a guest coming on tomorrow that he's got quite the vocabulary, but I think we have to create bridges.
Yes. Yeah. So that's essentially what the Lord told me, is he said, you need to take this to people who don't know me. And so as I was preparing for that interview, I said, okay, Lord, if I can reach just one person, because I know when you reach one person, that literally
The
can
ripple
change
effect.
an entire bloodline moving forward. And I had that one person reach out to me, and he said, after listening to you, I want to pray, but I don't know how. How do I have a relationship with Jesus? And I'm like, oh, Jesus. So that was the greatest compliment.
I love that. So that person saw what your intention and your mission and didn't call you new age
Right.
and saw the fruit of your spirit. And I absolutely love your spirit and I thank you so much for coming. And please
Mhm.
come back again before 2023 or before the end of 2023. I want to get you on before 2030.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. And then maybe one of these days we'll get like the super girls on, you and Gina and Amanda all together. That would be just my dream.
Mine as well. That would be wonderful.
Happy Friday, everyone. Find Laura no longer enslaved. Get your get your stuff started. Don't throw your cat out. Just do the parasite cleanse. Save the cat.
Yeah, save the
And
cat.
and Laura, I have one request, and that's that you let me know when it comes out officially on Audible, and I will that day purchase it and show it to you because I cannot wait to. I will have feedback finally.
Awesome. I'll do that for sure.
All right, thanks everybody. Have a beautiful weekend. I'll be back again tomorrow. I think around 3 p.m. with King Bao. He is a MMA fighter. He was the MMA fighter that screamed about pedophiles and how Hollywood better start talking about trafficking or he's going to call them all pedophiles. And he called out the Jimmy Kimmel challenge. And I mean, he's a force to be reckoned with. He is an entertainer at his heart, and he'll be here tomorrow.